Welcome, one and all, to the Veterans Radio Hour. It's our tribute to all of those who served our great nation's armed forces, past and present, and their tremendous accounts of heroic duty and bravery. With your host, Brigadier General Dave Grange. And now, coming to you live from our Veterans Center studio, here is General Dave.
Good evening. Tonight we present a program that originally was recorded December 8, 2002. The subject was the attack at Pearl Harbor. In this program, General Grange features veterans of the actual battle itself, in addition to the author, Carol V. Glines, who assisted Jimmy Doolittle in writing his great autobiography titled, I Could Never Be So Lucky Again, which stands against General Grant's autobiography as the two greatest American military autobiographies of all time. In addition to that, we were fortunate to have the wonderful Brigadier General retired George Bud Day. He was promoted to Brigadier General after he passed away. He was a prisoner of war during the Vietnam War, having flown missions into Hanoi, shot down, escaped, and during the time in his captivity was awarded not only the Medal of Honor, but the Air Force Cross. He began his career as an enlisted Marine in World War II. He then joined the Air Guard, found himself in the Air Force, fought all the way through the Korean War, and then flew again in Vietnam. He became the Air Force's most decorated officer. A truly wonderful gentleman who, in later life, became an attorney and challenged the U.S. government to ensure that veterans eventually would get concurrent receipt of benefits in addition to their retirement, a landmark case that he won in the Supreme Court. Also, we feature Hal Delano Roosevelt, the grandson of Franklin D. Roosevelt, our former president during the World War II era, who ran at the time a philanthropic organization oriented on memorials at the Pearl Harbor battle site. You can hear more about this by listening to the program. Wishing you the best. This is a retrospective. This is back to Veterans Radio Hour 1.0.
Tonight in Veterans Radio Studio, December 8th, 61 years later. On that date, 1941, the mighty Japanese flotilla that attacked Pearl Harbor December 7th, 1941, was only one of several powerful forays. Tokyo had simultaneously launched. The Japanese invasion forces bore down on U.S.-held Wake Island, Guam, and the Philippines, as well as Hawaii. Other Japanese expeditions attacked Hong Kong, Malaya, and Thailand. During the 3 weeks following December 7th, the world would witness some of the greatest tactical triumphs in military history. But also, it ranked as a disastrous strategic blunder for the Japanese. The Japanese attack made America's entry into the war a foregone conclusion. On December 8, 1941, President Franklin Roosevelt asked Congress for a declaration of war. Over the course of the next 4 years, the memory of the attack would rally the American people. Many Americans answered our country's call to defeat our enemies during World War II. How are they remembered today as we ready for our next possible war in the Middle East? Keeping the promise, 20 years of service for medical care for life. One of the questions tonight that we'll discuss with some of our great guests. Those guests are Colonel Bud Day, a 30-year veteran, Congressional Medal of Honor winner, former prisoner of war, served in the United States Marine Corps and the United States Air Force, veteran of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. Currently a trial lawyer, representing over 22,000 GIs. We also have on a telephone with us Hal Delano Roosevelt, President of Government Relations for Emergency Electric. He's a grandson of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, great-nephew of Teddy Roosevelt. He's the chair of the USS Arizona Memorial Trustees at Pearl Harbor. Our other guest in studio is John Berry, the outgoing president of Illinois Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, 6 years in the Navy, a Pearl Harbor veteran, 34 years Chicago Police Department, and yesterday, with Mayor Daley, he had a ceremony for the Chicago Remembers Pearl Harbor. that was a memorial at our Navy Pier here in Chicago. And also on the line with us is C.V. Kleins, author of Jimmy Doolittle biography. So we have some great guests tonight for our show, but I'd also like to recognize some guests from our live veterans audience tonight. First of all, Tom Gendarian, former POW, a Battle of the Bulge veteran. Today is his 51st wedding anniversary, and he's joined with his lovely wife Florence tonight in the studio. Also in studio is Len Bentini, the 173rd Airborne. Dominic Kearns, United States Marine Corps reservist, serving now. Joseph Zien, United States Air Force. Bob Borowski, United States Army, 1st Infantry Division, Vietnam. Mark Demon, United States Air Force Air Operations Specialist. And now to our executive producer, Kenny DeCamp.
Thank you, Dave. We've got a unique show tonight. I'm so glad that Colonel Bud's here with us. And John, I'm glad you're sitting around too. You're listening to us on the veteransradiohour.com. We've got a chat room. You can hit the discussion board and jump right in on the show with us. If you're listening by radio, call in our toll-free number, 866-928-2329. General Dave.
Okay, tonight our dedication, as we do every Veterans Radio Hour on a weekly basis, is to two individuals. Sergeant First Class Mark Jackson of the 1st Special Forces Group, killed in a blast from a terrorist explosion device in the Philippines on October 2nd. Sergeant Jackson's unit was a humanitarian mission, refurbishing schools and hospitals, digging wells, and providing medical assistance to those that needed it. Our second dedication tonight is from a casualty of October 8th. Another American service member was killed on a readiness training exercise on Falaka Island off of Kuwait. His name, Marine Lance Corporal Antonio Sled of the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit. He was shot by 2 Kuwaitis tied to Al-Qaeda.
Here's today's military quote of the day, brought to you with support from retired Lieutenant Colonel Dan Bogievich.
In 1940, the American people were adamantly opposed to going to war against Hitler. President Roosevelt, actually candidate Roosevelt, said months before the presidential election, quote, "I have said this before, but I shall say it again and again. Your boys are not going to be sent into any foreign wars." Everything changed the morning of December 7th, 1941. Roosevelt told Congress, yesterday, December 7th, a date which will live in infamy. Roosevelt demanded a state of war from Congress. After he received it, he immediately dispatched a top-secret cable to Winston Churchill. And he stated, "Today, all of us are in the same boat with you and the people of the empire, and it is a ship which will not and cannot be sunk."
You're listening to the Veterans Hour with retired Brigadier General Dave Grange. And now, back to the broadcast.
Okay, I'd like to go back to our guest real quick again here, and I want to just spend just a few extra seconds to highlight our guest one more time. Colonel George Bud Day, retired 30 years of service from Iowa. Joined the Marine Corps in 1942, served 30 months in the South Pacific as a non-commissioned officer. He was then received an appointment as a second lieutenant in the National Guard in 1950. Called to active duty again for the Air Force in 1951. Served 2 tours in the Far East as a fighter bomber pilot during the Korean War. Credited with living through the first no-shoot bailout from a burning jet fighter in England in 1955. I got to talk to him about that a little bit later. Vietnam veteran, first commander of an F-100 squadron in Vietnam, shot down over North Vietnam on August 26, 1967, and he spent 67 months as a prisoner of war. Colonel Day was the only prisoner of war to escape from prison in North Vietnam and then be recaptured by the Viet Cong in the South. He has more than 5,000 hours of flying time. He is the Air Force's most highly decorated officer. Medal of Honor, Air Force Cross, Distinguished Service Medal, Silver Star, Distinguished Flying Cross, Air Medal with many clusters, Bronze Star for Valor with clusters, Purple Heart with 3 oak leaf clusters, and a Prisoner of War ribbon. He resides in Shalimar, Florida. His business is in Fort Walton Beach, Florida, as a trial lawyer. And he is the author of 2 books I'll mention, A Return with Honor and Duty, Honor, Country. Our other key guest in the studio with us tonight is again John Berry, outgoing president of Illinois Pearl Harbor Survivors Association. Just had a great memorial the other day honoring our fallen comrades from Pearl Harbor. 34 years in Chicago Police Department and 6 years in the Navy, a Pearl Harbor veteran. Online also is Hal Delano Roosevelt, president of the Government Relations for Emergent Electric, but he's a grandson of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, great nephew of Teddy Roosevelt, and he is the chair of the USS Arizona Memorial Trustees at Pearl Harbor, and that's where we'll focus our discussions with him tonight. And then again, also online with us is C.V. Kleins, author of Jimmy Doolittle biography. And we're going to talk about Doolittle Raiders a little bit too, because it was America's response to take the war to the enemy a long distance right after the Pearl Harbor situation. So first of all, one of the primary reasons that we have Colonel Bud Day in here tonight with us is that there's an issue out there, and it has to do with 20 years of service for medical care for life. And I'd like to ask Bud Day just what is it all about? Is there a broken promise of the United States of America with its World War II and Korean veterans? What is it?
Yes. What happened back during World War II and earlier, the government offered a 20-year retirement with 50% pay and full lifetime medical care. And that that promise was fulfilled until 1995, at which point the government kicked us out of the World War II hospitals, the hospital system, and basically told the vet that he was on his own for medical care, whether it be just hospital confinement or doctor or medicine. So I sued them over that, and we lost the case in the district court initially, won it at the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals level. It was, the government asked for rehearing, that was denied. We then went to a 11-member court who turned into a 13-member court that just ruled against us on a 9-4 decision. The military members on the court were with us. The non-military members were against us. We're looking at taking this to the Supreme Court. We have got in the fight to win, and we're going to win.
Yeah, I think you're quoted until the last round is fired. Isn't that right, sir?
Exactly.
Yeah. Now you're representing over 20,000 veterans. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We call them the class act. What we'd intended to do was to turn this into a class action, but unfortunately we never got to that stage at the trial court. So, but we have the discharges, all the documentation on over 22,000 people.
Yeah. Well, one of our missions here in the Veterans Radio Studio Hour tonight is to get the word out to more Americans about the situation, because how you treat veterans from previous wars directly affects bringing people into the military today, because they watch. And we're on the brink of another war, most likely. And if it's not Iraq, it'll surely be something else. And people remember, and they watch carefully about how veterans are treated. And of course, being a veteran myself, I totally support your efforts, and we're behind you 100% on that. I'd like to turn a moment to John Berry, because he just did something yesterday with down at the Chicago Remembers Pearl Harbor with Mayor Daley. And what's critical, that's some of the same kind of people I think Bud Day is talking about. Is that not correct, John?
That's correct.
Yeah. Can you explain what you did yesterday with the mayor, just to talk about the just so we can understand the people we're talking about tonight?
Well, we work on this from one year to the next. December 7th, a year ago, we started planning for yesterday, and the mayor is very gracious about helping us gather together from all parts of Illinois. And he is a fervent believer in remembering Pearl Harbor. and especially in view of the fact that there are 7 Chicagoans still buried on the Arizona. There are 67 from Illinois still buried on the Arizona. And Illinois lost 125 men that day on December the 7th in various parts of the island.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I understand about 2,400 died. Is that correct?
2,403.
And 3. And how many from Illinois?
125 were from Illinois.
Yeah. It's just like, Illinois, I just want to put a plug in for the state here tonight, because I think that's over a million veterans of the, I think, 19 million veterans alive today, 1 million from this state.
Alone, that's correct.
Yeah, that's quite a lot. Now, on the Arizona, I understand that that's the burial site of many veterans still.
Correct.
Yeah. How many are entombed in the Arizona?
I don't know the exact count now because of the records. However, at the time there were 1,100.
Wow. And I understand. I think the number. I'm not sure, but I think it's around 900 are still
correct
in the ship.
And those men who were ship's crew on the Arizona and who survived, as they pass away, it's their family's privilege to request that the remains be buried on the Arizona. And each month there are burials of the remains of a crew member of the Arizona, and it's a very formal ceremony, and there's a place on board the sunken Arizona where the remains are deposited. Yeah, well, I think we'll turn then to Delano right now, because he's really very much involved in this. I understand that December 7th, many were burned to death or drowned, especially when the Arizona exploded and sank. And I believe around 900 sailors still remain entombed there today. Delano, are you with us, sir?
I am. Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is a great honor.
Yeah, could you just continue on with what John Berry was saying about the Arizona?
Yeah. Well, just to give you a little of my background with the Arizona and Pearl Harbor, I was approached by the National Parks system about 2 years ago to see if I would be interested in chairing a committee, actually a board of trustees, with the hopes of raising money, about a $10 million capital campaign project to expand and basically rebuild the visitor center at the Arizona. It was originally designed for about 500,000 people a year to go through, and it's been about 1.5 million people just about since we opened the doors. And so beyond that, beyond just the number of folks that travel through there annually, we have really fantastic memorabilia that we would love to be putting out on permanent basis at the Visitor Center, but due to the fact that the current facility is that wonderful Hawaiian open architecture, there's no real controlled spaces there, and these things need, with all that humidity and salt air, they really need a controlled environment. And that's how I originally got involved, or was offered to get involved. It seemed to me at the time that that really, after talking to my wife Jan about it in great detail, it would seem like a very natural and prudent thing for me to do on a personal basis. I'm only 43 years old. My grandfather, died in 45, and I was born in 59, so I missed him. But my father, James Roosevelt, who was his eldest son, he was in the Marines and fought in the South Pacific. As a matter of fact, one of the speeches that FDR made just prior or just after declaring war in Japan was referencing the fact that before he would ask any other families to send their sons to war, that he would first send his own. And all 4 of his sons served in the 4 branches of the military in that war. And so Dad fought as a member of Carlson's Raiders Battalion down in the South Pacific and was wounded on Macon Island and fought Guadalcanal, fought Tarawa, and I've always thought, boy, how could I, honor my father and his efforts to make this a better place for myself and for my two boys that Jan and I are raising at this point in time. And this seemed to be just a natural. And so I obviously agreed with great pleasure to get involved with the Arizona. And it is, I have found just on a personal level that this particular memorial, I think, stands out more so than almost all of the other memorials that we have here in the United States. And the reason I say that with such conviction is because what I've witnessed there. Now, when we have...
Now, Delano,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to come back to you.
Yeah.
We only got a couple of minutes on this segment. Let me, please save that last part because we
You
want to
bet.
hear about it. Because I want to go, before we have to go to a break, to C.V. Kleins real quick, author of the Jimmy Doolittle biography. Are you with us?
Yes, sir. Right here.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us. We're gonna talk about this response, the Doolittle raid, and one of the next breaks, and we really need you to hang with us to go into that, because that's where we took the fight to the enemy. Are you prepared to talk about that?
Surely, you bet.
Okay, and first of all, real quick, when did you write this book?
The Doolittle autobiography, I helped him with it. That came out in '91. But I've written two other books on the raid. One came out in '64 and another one in the '80s, and it's been reprinted several times.
Yeah. Okay, great. We're going to come back to you. I just want to close this segment out, though, with Bud Day, because we're focused on veterans right now in the Pacific, but that's because it's December 8th, and that's appropriate. But Bud Day is talking about veterans, and a lot of veterans in many different theaters. But I just want to ask him, with the situation it is right now, Bud, what do the veterans do for medical care? What have they been forced to do?
They have to go to Medicare, and they have to buy Medicare B. Right now, because we got the TRICARE for Life bill passed in 2000, they have access to fairly decent civilian medical care, but they are still having to pay for the care.
Right.
And that's our objection.
Okay, and we got 15 seconds. What age group are we talking about?
These people will all be in their 70s, 80s, 90s, and we have 2 or 3 members that are over 100.
All right, and 65 and over, basically?
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to come back to you shortly in a second segment to every one of our guests and talk about this issue and our veterans. Kenny?
That was just unbelievable. This is our 14th program. We have to thank you all for being with us. We're going to recognize one of our new partners, military.com, connecting the military community to all of the benefits of service, helping to locate old service buddies and veteran jobs, the GI Bill, VA loans, and even more. Military.com, saluting all who answered the call to our nation's service. We also want to recognize the USO, United Service Organization. This is that season. We'll be doing a show on veterans and the holidays real soon, so stick with us. That's coming December 22nd. We want to recognize the National Vietnam Veterans Art Museum, where Bud Day had the privilege of visiting today. 18th and Indiana in Chicago, with over 800 works of art from 160 artists, including the ceiling sculpture Above and Beyond, more than 58,000 dog tags of those who gave their ultimate sacrifice in Vietnam. And of course, thanks to the City of Chicago and the Veterans Council and their chairman, Roy Dolgus, for all he does to help us out. We also want you to know, next week, Preserving Our Veteran Stories, we'll have the producer of the History Channel, Pete Bardis, with the Library of Congress. And I want to give a great big thanks today, as the holiday season starts, to our wonderful General Dave, because General Dave, you've been coming along and it's been very important to us. Thank you, Holly, for allowing that to happen. CNN, by the way, is with us tonight. Our good friend, turns out, of David Grange, Mike Betcher, is in town, and we've got a little bit of CNN coverage happening, so we want to thank them for spreading the word of the Veterans Radio Hour, Chicago, Illinois.
At ease, soldier. The Veterans Hour with General Dave will settle in again after a short break on the Talk Radio Network. Weigh mates. The Veterans Radio Hour now continues full speed ahead on the Talk Radio Network.
Aye, aye, sir. The Veterans Hour proudly presents our military hero's story of valor.
Now this week we're going to talk about a hero from December 7th. During a Japanese raid, many heroic deeds passed unnoticed and unmentioned in official reports. Of those recognized, none is more compelling than that of Chief Water Tender Peter Tomich of the ship Utah. As the Utah's list increased from bomb damage, water surged through the vessel. Many sailors were trapped below the decks. To ensure the escape of his men, Tomich stayed behind at his station in the pumping room and thus sealed his own doom. The Navy awarded him the Congressional Medal of Honor posthumously.
The Veterans Radio Hour salutes the Active Service Person of the Week, made possible through the support of Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer. As they say, PBR me, ASAP. Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer, available at your local retail outlet.
Tonight, the Veterans Radio Studio would like to salute Marine Reservist Lane Smuts. He deployed this week along with approximately 60 of his buddies, other Marines. Lane is from Fort Worth, Texas. He is a sophomore math major at TCU and a Marine corporal. He joined the reservists after finishing high school. Lane will remain activated for 1 year. He is a structural mechanic on a C-130 aircraft. Hoo-ah to Corporal Lane Smuts.
You're tuned to the Veterans Radio Hour with retired General Dave Grange, coming to you from the Veterans Center studio. And now, back to the show.
And welcome back. Our guest in studio is Colonel Bud Day, a 30-year veteran, Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, former prisoner of war. We also have John Berry, who was a veteran of Pearl Harbor and a 34-year Chicago police officer. We have online two guests, Hal Delano Roosevelt, president of the Government Relations for Emergent Electric. He is also the grandson of FDR and a great-nephew of Teddy Roosevelt. And we have C.V. Kleins, author of Jimmy Doolittle's autobiography and several other books on the Doolittle raid, to be exact. He's on the telephone with us. On December 8th, even with knowledge that Pearl Harbor was attacked, on December 7th, the Japanese destroyed American heavy bombers and fighters parked on Clark and Iba fields, destroying 55 of the 72 P-40s and a half of MacArthur's B-17 bombers. In addition to striking Clark Field and Iba Field, Japanese planes also hit Caveat Naval Yard, destroying storage barges and facilities. I'd like to turn to John Berry, who is a veteran of the Pearl Harbor attack. Were you aware of what happened, or how quick did you find out about what happened in the Philippines and elsewhere? Were you so involved with the Pearl Harbor disaster? Were you even aware of it?
Well, first of all, I'd like to tell you my assignment. I'm overwhelmed at being in the presence of Bud Day, sir. But I'm not a hero. I was there, and I was attached to the Naval Intelligence on December the 7th. And our office, our unit, was located in downtown Honolulu in the Alexander Young Hotel on the 5th floor. Our office and our agents and fellow naval personnel were involved with keeping records and investigating subversive activities by the Japanese on the island of Oahu. When I arrived in Honolulu, middle of 1941, I was assigned to that office, and immediately I was told what my duties would be. I was to learn the island as rapidly as I could. I was going to be assigned as a driver for agents, naval personnel, Army personnel, FBI, Secret Service, and I was assigned also as chauffeur to my skipper, I.H. Mayfield. My duty was to learn every back alley, every back street, every neighborhood on the island. And that's what I did. I was put in place with a Chinese Hawaiian fellow who was an agent, and he knew the island like the palm of his hand. And he taught me where to go, where the alleys were, where the streets were, how to drive down all those streets that didn't have any sign. Why? Because he knew that I wasn't told a lot of things, but he knew that I would be asked to drive certain personnel in certain places if anything ever happened, which it did happen.
Yeah.
When I got there, we knew immediately that there was going to be a war. We didn't know when, we didn't know where, but we were already on a war footing basis. As a matter of fact, December the 2nd, we were on a war footing basis because of the activities around the island.
Yeah. Okay, and now after that, after those disasters in Pearl Harbor, the Philippines, Guam, Wake Island, other places, we went on the offensive, and of course Americans like to go on the offensive, take the fight to the enemy. And on April 18th, 1942, 16 B-25s appeared over Japan and lifted the gloom that had descended upon America and our Pacific allies since December 7th, 1941. These brave, innovative, and the psychological attack was Doolittle's raid, known as 30 Seconds Over Tokyo. It's called different names, conducted by the courageous Doolittle Raiders. And I'd like to ask C.V. Klein just to talk about that Doolittle raid, the impact that mission had on America for just a minute or two.
Well, this is C.V. Glines, G-L-I-N-E-S. The raid had a tremendous psychological impact on the Japanese, first of all, because they had told their people that they could never be attacked. And it was just the opposite here in the United States. We had suffered so many losses between December 7th and mid-April that we needed good news. We needed it badly. And the Doolittle raid, when it was announced that a number of American bombers had actually bombed the capital city of Japan and 4 other cities, there was a tremendous morale boost here in this country. We could fight back, and we said we were going to, and we did. And that was the tremendous impact, and that was really the main purpose of the raid. The physical damage was not very great. After all, we're only 16 bombers with 2,000 pounds of bombs in each, and in the 5 cities, they did cause damage, but it was not very consequential when you compare it with what happened with the B-29s later in the war. But it was a first strike, and it really encouraged Americans that we could retaliate, and we did.
Yeah, you mentioned the B-29s. I guess after the Doolittle raid, that didn't happen until 26 months later.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
So it just shows, and I also believe that the Doolittle raid was the first time that was a joint mission where you had Army Air Corps bombers on naval vessels.
Yes, that was the first joint air action that either service had taken part in.
Now, before we get back to the primary subject tonight on taking care of veterans, I do want to ask Bud Day a question. From the Doolittle raid, there were 8 prisoners of war. 3 were executed, 1 died of starvation, and I believe 4 returned. You saw a lot of that yourself, I'm sure, of mistreatment to our soldiers or sailors, Marines, airmen.
The 20th century was not a good time to be a POW, particularly an Oriental POW. Japanese prisoners had it very bad. Korea was terrible, and of course Vietnam was just gross.
Yeah, and it's Tom Gendarnian is in here tonight, and of course he was a POW in Germany from the Battle of the Bulge, and we respect what you went through and your ability to continue to operate properly from that ordeal. But let me ask you a question, please, on some people say, what can service members themselves do about the issue right now? What can they do with the government, the situation right now on the medical support?
I think it's important that they recognize their duty to vote. Every little pebble that goes into a lake causes a ripple. I think that when I was a young Marine, you were apolitical. You simply didn't get involved in politics. We don't have any choice now. We have very few voices in Congress because there are not many veterans in Congress. Obviously, the court doesn't have enough veterans in the court. So I think it's very important that we stay tuned to the issues that relate to soldiering and after career care. And this idea that the government will break a very sacred promise to provide you and your family medical care when you're getting into your autumn years, to break that is really a breach of honor. It's more than just a breach of contract. It's a breach of the government's clear duty to the serviceman, and we have a trust relationship with them that just cannot be broken. And it's important that the serviceman be tuned to that, and that he stays in contact with his congressman or his senators, and that he is proactive.
You know, it's very similar to whether it's written on paper as a contract. It kind of reminds me of code of conduct that a service member is responsible to uphold, but there's also a moral contract that the United States of America has to its MIAs, POWs. It reminds me of that, and it's the contract that whether the recruiter had the right to say it or not, that this will be a benefit if you serve for the 20 years, and both times were crisis, I guess, for most of these people actually when they joined up, World War II and Korea.
Yes.
That must be honored, and it's so important to the future of having people join the military, and the military needs people badly right now. But you answered, Bud Day, a great question from Carol in Columbus, Georgia, and I'm sure that she appreciates that. What is the future, Bud, of this challenge, of this offensive that you have to solve this problem?
I'm going to be filing an appeal to the Supreme Court not any later than the 17th of February. And in good American fashion, a bunch of former military lawyers across the country have been in contact with me and have offered to file what's called amicus briefs, which means friend of court briefs. So when I file my brief with the Supreme Court, these various lawyers representing veterans around the country will be filing briefs also. And I trust that we'll be able to cover all of our issues in a good fashion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're behind you, and we wish you well, and got to keep up the fight, obviously, and solve this for our veterans. I want to go. We have about what, Kenny, a minute or
Another minute to go.
About a minute to go. I'd like to go back to Delano, if I may. We cut him off a little bit earlier, and Delano, I'd like you to explain. We only have 30 seconds to a break, but we'll come back again in the third segment. What do you need in that memorial? What do you need right now in that memorial in Pearl Harbor?
Well, what we need is we need to raise the money to expand and provide for the new construction for an enclosed, enlarged memorial for the Visitor Center.
10 seconds.
And that's really the bottom line right now, is we're raising money like crazy to get that done.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see what we can do to support you on that from here. I'm going to go back to Kenny now. Thank you very much.
The Veterans Hour continues to salute our nation's armed forces and their families when the Veterans Hour continues on the TRN Talk Radio Network. And now, with the update on military news from around the world, here's General Dave reporting.
During World War II, America's freshwater aircraft carriers proved valuable training sites for U.S. fighter pilots heading to the Pacific. Off the Lakeshore Drive in Chicago were the practice carriers Sable and Wolverine, converted coal-burning, side paddle-wheeled tour ships from the Great Lakes. These were inland water aircraft carriers. They would berth at Navy Pier and then move out into Lake Michigan for training. These inland carriers were 300 foot shorter than the decks of the fleet carriers like the Yorktown and the Enterprise. They were only 27 foot above the water compared to 80 feet of the fleet carriers. The decks were made of wood. Many aviators qualified on these carriers in Lake Michigan for combat in the Pacific. And now we're going back to our last segment of our show. In studio with us is Colonel Bud Day, 30-year veteran, Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, former prisoner of war. He is working on a big issue for our veterans, and we'll talk about that again in a moment. We have John Berry, again, also a Navy veteran, Chicago police officer veteran, and just finished a great memorial service yesterday for those lost at Pearl Harbor with Mayor Daley. We have C.V. Glines. He was a co-author to help Jimmy Doolittle in his autobiography and several other publications. And we also have Delano Roosevelt, who is the chair of the USS Arizona Memorial Trustees at Pearl Harbor, a grandson of FDR and great-nephew of Teddy Roosevelt. Okay, so what I'd like to do is I would like to just go back just for a minute to C.V. Glines on the Doolittle raid, and to see these 80 men that went on the raid. You know, I was just talking to Bud Day in a break, and he talked about how this raid was such a shot in the arm for the American people. And though many people say, well, wait a minute, you lost all the aircraft. Some were KIA. One aircraft was lost, I guess, internment in the USSR. Those guys are gone. 8 POWs, half of them were killed by the Japanese. Hundreds of Chinese, if not 1,000 or so, were executed for supporting the Doolittle Raiders. Was the mission worth it?
It certainly was. Not only the morale factor, but the fact that it started the Japanese to change their strategy in the Pacific, and that was what persuaded them to pursue an attack on Midway. And as we all know, the Battle of Midway was disastrous for the Japanese. They lost 4 carriers and hundreds of men, and it was provoked by the Doolittle raid. So it had an effect far beyond just the psychological impact against the Japanese and for the American people.
Yeah, I understand. After that, it was also Coral Sea, and I believe a few other victories, a string of victories for the United States.
Yes, but it was a Battle of Midway that was provoked directly because of the raid.
Yeah. Do you keep in touch with any of the Doolittle Raiders today?
Oh, yes. I'm their historian,
Uh-huh.
and there are 20 of them still living out of the original 80. And they'll meet for the next reunion in April at the Jimmy Doolittle Air and Space Museum, which is a brand new museum dedicated to the boss, and we'll all meet out there at that time.
Where is it located?
It's at Travis Air Force Base. They've just gotten some new property across the highway from the Travis Air Force Base, and we're going to dedicate it in April.
Okay. Is Delano with us still? Delano?
Yes.
Okay. In summary, could you just give us 1 minute of the effect that the memorial that at Pearl Harbor of the USS Arizona, what effect does that have on the American people?
Well, I think it's transformed itself from a memorial into a place of a couple things. One, a place of learning. It's a place where we can teach our children who have absolutely no idea really what war is. They don't know what the Depression was all about, anything like that. And this is a place of learning, I think. The second thing is, more importantly, so it's a place of healing. On the 60th anniversary, we put Pearl Harbor survivors along with the actual dive bomber pilots that are still around on the same stage, and it was an absolutely magical thing to see these people come together, shake hands, embrace each other, recognize that we were just doing for our country, and to see that kind of healing happen, it really makes one look back at their own lives and say, geez, is it really worth it what I get upset about on a daily basis? It was truly an amazing thing.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Delano. And I would like to go to John Berry now and just give us 45 seconds of the importance of, like the ceremony you attended the other day with the mayor, How important is that to the American people and respect for your fallen comrades?
That's why I'm active in the Pearl Harbor survivors. Our hue and cry is remember Pearl Harbor. Keep America alert. And yesterday, what we said there was, remember those present are Pearl Harbor survivors. But in effect, why we were there was to remember those men who had no choice in the matter. They were killed on December the 7th. And that was one of the main reasons why we gather each December the 7th, to remember those who paid the supreme sacrifice in defense of our country.
Thank you, John. And those that are on the chat room, we're going to come back to you for about 15 minutes after the show to answer all these questions that we have, at least most of them. But in closing, I'd like to turn it over to Bud Day in about 30 seconds. Just leave something for the audience to remember about your effort right now to support the veterans.
It's every veteran's duty to make sure that we hold hands as we go forward into to war. It's important that we hold hands in peace, and certainly if we don't protect the benefits that are guaranteed to us, the following generation will have none. So it's important that you vote. It's important that you stay interested in politics. It's important that you do your duty.
Okay, thank you, Bud Day, and thank you for all our guests tonight. Hua.
We'll be Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're glad you're still with us. We're here on the internet. We're streaming how many countries? I think we're at 57 tonight or something, having a very unique time here with Colonel Bud and John Barry. We had to say goodbye to Roosevelt. Mr. Roosevelt had to leave. He's got a situation he's dealing with out in Long Beach, California. We wish him very well, and we thank him very much for being with us. C.B. Glines is still with us, General, but I know you've got a question here on our chat room that I think we want to get to.
Yeah, let's go to Hal first from Burleson, Texas. He has a question. I think it's for Bud Day. Let me see if I can relay this properly. As a contracting officer's technical representative, I made a verbal modification to a contract the government would have been liable for the modification. How can courts say that these promises that were made by recruiters and career counselors, officers, and NCOs are not binding?
They really have to stretch it. There is no real logical interpretation that says that is true. Under the Little Tucker Act, any government agent can contract with another person or a company up and bind the government up to $10,000, which obviously you've done and you understand that that can be done. How the court can worm their way out of this, to be straightforward with you, is more than I can understand, because there was no question that there was an offer, there was an acceptance, and then there was performance, and that's what it takes to put a contract together. But somehow or another, they have basically wormed around that, and with a real distorted kind of reasoning, have said that it was a good faith promise which they breached. Now explain to me how you can breach a promise in good faith.
Well, I think that answered Hal's question and answered my thoughts on it. Let me go to Big Steve, and I'm not sure where Big Steve is from. Anyway, he has a question for C.B. Glines. Was there a B-25 that landed wheels down in Russia and it's crewed and turned until the end of the war?
It is true that one of the B-25s, the pilot elected to go to Russia because they were so short of fuel that they couldn't possibly have made it across the China Sea to China. So he made the decision, command decision, to go to Russia, and he did land wheels down. The airplane was intact. The crew was not hurt on the landing, and the airplane was impounded, and they were captured, of course, and they spent the next 14 months in Russia until they were escaped by the help of a border runner into Iran. So it's true that 5 of them were made internees of the Russians during that period.
And they never came back?
No, they came back 14 months later, yes.
After the lines moved.
I beg your pardon?
What caused them again to come back?
Oh, they were able to escape with the help of a border runner.
I see. Okay, I misunderstood.
They had some money between them, and they finally got to the point after 14 months in southern, southwestern Russia to buy their way across the border.
All right. This question is from code name Be Prepared. Pearl Harbor is still vulnerable. The British had broken the Japanese JN-25 codes, and Winston Churchill had warned us of the attack. There is no guarantee that people who live in secret will warn the rest of us in the open about an attack. You can get commercial satellite imagery and target attack surface ships. Why doesn't the Navy drop a carrier and build the mobile offshore base, MOB, so we cannot have to rely on fixed bases like Pearl Harbor so much? John Barry's dying to answer that one.
What do you think, John?
No, don't go into the mobile base. That's a readiness issue, and I can answer that one if you want. But
do that.
What about the what about the intel part though? You had said something about December 2nd. I'd like to go back to that from the show when you mentioned about December 7th. What we thought was going to, we thought war was imminent, and that.
There was a lot of activity on December the 2nd. The higher-ranking officers were meeting more than they did in the month before, and I was involved there because I was a chauffeur for our skipper.
Right.
But there was actually no hint of an active war until we sank the sub off of Pearl.
Yeah, the mini sub.
The mini sub,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
At that time, my training was finished. I was in the field serving the intelligence office, and I was with an agent who had to do with setting up radio communicating equipment around the island. This was necessary because you had to have one unit attached to the main base.
Okay, and I'm going to answer the MOB problem. I think you're going to see some type of barge mobile platform set up, placed just like prepositioned stock, wartime reserves, just like we have in Korea, the Middle East, Italy, Diego Garcia, etc. I think you'll see some of those things that'll be moved in a theater within a theater to critical points for launch and recovery of aircraft and special operation raids, etc. I think you'll see some of those things, but the life of the carrier is alive and well, and with the recent issue in the Middle East of possible war for Iraq, with maybe limited basing, the aircraft carriers are more prominent, carrier groups are more prominent than ever, so I don't think they're going to go away, and rightfully so. I want to turn to Carol. And she has a question reference SEER training, survival, escape, or evasion, resistance, escape training, saying it's not mandatory. Actually, it is mandatory for certain units, but for the overall military, it's not mandatory. Do you think that the armed services should make it a mandatory class that every soldier or every service member should take that's put into harm's way? I'll ask Bud Day that question if it's all right.
Yes, I agree with that idea. I think it should be mandatory, particularly if you have the funds to do that. If you can't go to, and there is a great SEER school out, it's called the Colonel Bud Day School, right. And I recommend you go out and see the sign at least. And but that training is very relevant, and it's important to learn a lot of the resistance techniques, and it's certainly important that you learn how to get out there and navigate, find your way around. So my personal vote would be to send everybody if we have the dough to do it.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But I'm going to ask that same question to C.V. Glines also because of the escape and evasion and also captivity of some of the Doolittle Raiders. C.V.?
Well, there were 8 of them were captured by the Japanese, and of those 8, 3 were executed by firing squad. The Japanese had a mock trial and determined that 3 of them should die. So the 4th one died in prison from malnutrition. The other 4 survived and were returned after the war. And of those 4, still 3 are living.
But what about training ahead of time? Do you know? Are you aware of the pilots receiving any kind of escape and evasion training before they went on a mission?
No, the only instructions they got was on board the carrier, the Hornet, from Dr. White, who gave them briefings about the sanitary conditions in China and warned them about drinking the water and that kind of thing. But no other kinds of training. They didn't have any such thing as the Reno school that we had later and things like that. So I would say that they got minimal, and no training at all, really, when it comes right down to survival training.
Were they issued any kind of an escape kit, like blood chits, pointy talkies, something in the different dialects in China?
No, those came a little later in the war.
So they had none of that?
No.
Wow. Fairchild's a great school. There's other Sears schools that are great. You know, Special Operation Forces are lucky because they all get to go to that type of training.
Yes.
As Bud Day knows, there's different levels of SEER training, A, B, and C. And after I had the misfortune of having 3 of my soldiers taken prisoner in Macedonia by the Serbs during the Kosovo campaign, you can't get the slots. There's not enough training slots available or instructors to handle even what's required by the military regulation to send people to SEER school. So it's very difficult, but after, just like you said about taking care of the 20-year veterans on lifetime health care, we raised so much cane about it that they improved, and we were able to do some things locally of modified courses just so we can get all our helicopter pilots and our cavalry and our scouts and all those guys trained, because we thought we were going to go either a war in the Middle East or into Kosovo if it wasn't just an air campaign. But it's still an area that needs a lot of improvement, and Carol, you got a lot of answers on that question, so I hope you're satisfied with the discussion from our guest. Go ahead, Kenny.
Hey, Colonel Bud, tell us what's for you next. We know you got a big week coming up this week. And could you explain a little bit to our audience how proud I am about it?
Well, thanks. I'm going to Sioux City tomorrow. Ross Perot was kind enough to build a 9-foot statue on a 4-foot base, and they're going to unveil it in Sioux City on Tuesday at 1:30. So I'm going to meet my family in Minneapolis tomorrow, and then we're going down to Sioux City. And they had named the airport there Colonel Bud Day Field.
Excellent.
So I'm going over to do the unveiling, and I'm just very humbled about that. And then with a little luck, I'm going to to South Dakota and shoot a few pheasants.
There you go.
And have a couple nice dinners, yes.
All right. Anybody in the audience have a question of any of our guests? Now's your chance.
Anybody have a question?
Well, we've been getting more and more in on the chat room. Oh, go ahead, John.
I'd like to say two things. The one thing I want to say is I want to talk about the memory of a couple of buddies of mine who were lost when the USS Langley was sunk after December the 7th. It was on its way to Guam and Wake to drop off a load of planes for those two airfields, and some of my units were split. The naval intelligence men were split, and some were sent there. And the Langley was the first United States carrier sunk in World War II, the USS Langley. The other thing that I wanted to mention was about our Abraham Lincoln National Veteran Cemetery, which is located in Elwood, Illinois, south of Joliet. Our organization, the Pearl Harbor Survivors of Illinois, raised a sum of money. We had a memorial built in the new Abraham Lincoln National Veteran Cemetery there, and it was dedicated a year and a half ago. And I advise everyone to go there and see this beautiful memorial, which is dedicated to those fellows who died on December the 7th at Pearl Harbor. Thank you.
You're here.
All right, thank you.
You know, I don't know, Colonel Bud, somebody wanted to find out, I know about this, I'm wondering if you do. It has to do with a billboard that was put up in Waco, Texas recently.
Yes, I do. That's been part of our effort when we first cranked up this effort to get the government to stick with their promise. We decided to attack it several ways. One, filed a lawsuit. Another was to go after Congress. And so we started a billboard program around the country, which basically said, Mr. Congressman, y'all have broken the promise to us for free lifetime medical care. And we've made an effort to put those in their hometown. In the case of our senior member of the Senate, we put it across the street from his headquarters.
Good.
And well, we began to get some attention. And as the result of that was that we got Ronnie Shows from Mississippi to sponsor the Keep the Promises to World War II and Korean Vets. And Tim Johnson from South Dakota agreed to sign on in the Senate. And I might add, neither one of these guys were in a real key position. Shows was not even on a military committee like the Armed Services or one of those committees. You know, he was a young guy from Mississippi. So the bottom line of what I'm saying is that grassroots will do a lot of things, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here and hear you and get your message, and to permit people like John and myself and Carol Kleins and these people to talk about some things that have happened to us, because all of that are part of our history. And if we can't keep the faith with the people who have served, we've lost our way.
But have a website that you can get out that people can get information on this part.
Yes, I do. If you will go on the net looking for combat pilots, I have a site called ColonelBudDay.com. And so if you get up on that thing, you can find me on the web. And also the Class Act group, which is the sponsor of the Keep the Promises and the Class Act suit. They have a website which I can get with you after this. It'll take me a minute to find it. But we have a big website about the lawsuit and about the Keep the Promises issue.
Okay, and we'll make sure we follow up then. We have Jay Greeley that's been on the line for quite a while, so we're going to take that phone call real quick. He has a question for one of you. Jay, are you there?
Yes, sir, I am.
Well, thanks for, you've been in lean and rest for a long time. Go ahead.
Okay. I need to be.
Yeah, I know.
This is a question for Bud Day. You know, we've got to keep the faith with our veterans, and, you know, just this last week, I ended up buying a food for a veteran and paid for his drugs and got him in to see some county relief folks. First time out of a job, Pennsylvania proud type kid with a young wife, and the first time he's ever really been facing the bare cupboards and bare feet. And, you know, we got to have something that's going to help these guys. I think we're going to get them back in the fold. I think we'll put them into Charlie Company, 1st to 16th Virginia Army National Guard, and get them signed up. But have them come back. But there's an 82nd engineer that we ought to take care of.
Well, I think that's our duty. We go to war with these people when they're healthy, and we have to support them when things are not so good. And I think it's mighty great that y'all are lending a helping hand.
Well, we're doing that as part of our APHIS program, Army Emergency Relief here in Loudoun County with the American Red Cross. And the only reason I found them was we were running the doctors back during the snowstorm to the hospital and the nurses. And here's this kid just standing there, and he comes up to me and he says, "Can you give me a ride back to Leesburg?" He said, "There's no public transportation." I said, "Sure." And we get to talking to him, and he's got no food. He's got to get 3 types of medication, and he's got no money. And we took care of that, but I mean, how many others are out there right now who are facing the bear, as I say, or the wolf at the door, and nobody's helping them because they don't know where to go, and they're extremely proud people.
Well, our groups like the DAV, the Legion, all of those kind of groups normally have liaison officers. I think maybe an important thing is when these kids get separated from the military is to kind of give them a little bit of direction on how to get help should they have problems. We have some wonderful trained officials out in those veterans groups that are very helpful, and there isn't a Legion post or a VFW post that I know of that won't step up the plate and support people that need help.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Jay, for hanging in there to join the group. I want to thank all the guests again. C.V. Glines, again, author or co-author with the Jimmy Doolittle autobiography and several other books in supporting the Doolittle Raiders. On John Berry, veteran of the Navy, Pearl Harbor, 34 years in the Chicago Police Department. And also, of course, Colonel Bud Day, 30-year veteran, Congressional Medal of Honor recipient, former prisoner of war. Served in the Marine Corps and the Air Force, and now in a Class Act group really fighting hard to take care of veterans who were promised medical support for life if they serve their military for 20-plus years. So again, thank you, and thank you all for our audience and our guests online and those listeners. Thank you, HUA. General Dave out.
Thank you for that final word from our sponsors. This is Ranger Doug. We hope you enjoyed this program that encapsulated the World War II experience with even Chicago veterans of the battle, the infamous attack at Pearl Harbor. We have to remember, though, that after all that went on during World War II, we emerged with 2 mortal enemies, Germany and Japan, which, due to the amazing influence of the democratic forms of government present at the end of the war, were successfully able, through such things as the Marshall Plan and MacArthur's occupation of Japan, to turn Germany and Japan into favorable allies with wonderful economic histories and systems that persist even to this day. It's amazing what war can do if people learn to terminate the conflict correctly. Ranger Doug out.
Thank you for listening to Veterans Radio Hour. Veterans Broadcast Network, bringing you shows like Veterans Radio Hour, Wounded But Not Broken, and Roll Call. No one left behind.